Welcome back to Education Express, my dear friends. We'll continue with theory of supply. As I discussed with earlier, economic has its own set of laws. That means, as I told you earlier also, I will give an example. Health is wealth. Okay. Now, we usually use this phrase, health is wealth, and indeed we believe also, okay, health is wealth. But in economic sense, this phrase has got no validity at all. Because economic does not endorse the fact that health is wealth. It says that anything to be called as a wealth must have four criteria. The first one is utility, that means usefulness of the commodity, or rather the capacity of the commodity to satisfy one's want. Second is scarcity. Scarcity is in relation to demand and supply equation. That means, in case if you have to pay a price for a commodity, it is definitely scarce. See, air. You don't have to pay any price for air. So I can say that air is a free goods of nature. But if you see oxygen, those people who are on the ventilators fighting coronavirus, I'm sure for that air they have to pay the price. Why? Because ventilators as well as oxygen is scarce. So scarcity, utility, transferability. Can I transfer my health to you? I am too obese and you are too skinny. So basically the equation that I transfer my bit of health to you would result in win-win situation for both of us. Perhaps, unfortunately, this cannot happen. It is for this reason that economics says that health is not wealth. Why? It cannot be transferred. So coming back to the theory of supply, it is very important to understand that economic terms have got a very deep and impactful meaning in every line, every word that we interpret. For example, let us say if price of product A increases by rupees 400. If price of the product A increases by rupees 400, what will happen to supply? A. Sir, supply will increase. B. Supply will decrease. If price of product A increases by rupees 400, what will happen to supply? So if I am a producer, I'll enjoy more and more profits. So if price of product A increases by 400, sir, my supply will A. increase, B. decrease. I am sure you listen to this question several times, many times. And every time you listen to this question, every time you watch this question, every time this question will touch your mind, I am sure your answer, and those who are watching this video, they may probably conclude, sir, it will increase, right? It will increase. Whereas the matter of the fact is, it will not increase. Does that mean it will decrease? I'm sorry. It will not even decrease also. The economic concept for this is price will increase, then my supply will rise. So increase and rise are synonymous. They are same. They are same in literal meaning, dictionary meaning. But economic has got its own set of laws. It says that the word rise or fall have a special meaning and will not have the synonymous meaning with the word increase or decrease. That means in economic, rise will have a different meaning from the word increase. Rise in supply or fall in supply can happen. Can happen. Only and only for one reason. That means rise or fall in supply can happen only for one reason. And what is that reason? Price. Price of a product. The word rise and fall can be used for only one reason. That means either rise or fall in the price, or increase or decrease in the price of that product. If, let us say, for any reason there is a change in the technology. Because of the change in technology, earlier I used to supply 500 units. Now I can supply 700 units because of the upgradation in the technology. I upgraded my technology. Now I am able to supply more than what I used to supply before. It is not called as rise in supply. It will be called as increase in supply. The word increase or the word decrease in supply can be due to any factor other than price. Wow! That means, in short, there is a big difference between rise in price and increase in price. Or there is a difference between, what I mean to say is, there is a big difference between rise in supply and increase in supply. Of course, there is big, vast. As per economics, economics states that rise in supply happens or fall in supply happens only due to one factor, and that factor is price of that product. Rise or fall can happen only due to the change in price of the product, whereas increase or decrease can happen due to any factor other than the price. So if the change is happening because of the price, it means it is rise or fall. But if the change is happening due to any other factor, so could you please tell me what are the other factors? Yes, you remember we have done determinants of supply. In determinants of supply, we have covered that supply can be influenced or supply can be determined by various factors. All those factors can be listed over here and they will be equally responsible to bring increase or decrease in supply. So how? Taxation. If the taxation policy is favorable, supply will increase. If it is unfavorable, supply will decrease. Government policies. In case if they are conducive, supply will increase. Otherwise, supply will decrease. So what about cost of factors of production? If cost of factors of production reduces, supply will increase. If cost of factor of production increases, supply will decrease. I cannot use the word rise or fall. I have to compulsorily, mandatorily use the word increase or decrease for all the factors other than price of the product. That means, in short, if you want to understand the concept in just a short synonyms or a short glimpse of it, then I would say that rise or fall can happen. Why it can happen? It can happen only due to change in price of a product. Absolutely. Rise or fall in supply. Whereas increase or decrease in supply can happen only due to factors other than price. Other than price. So, an example, could you please list down few factors? Yes, it can happen due to change in technology, due to change in cost of factors of production. It can happen due to change in the taxation policy. It can happen due to change in subsidy. It can happen due to future anticipation and many more reasons. So my dear friend, you must understand the bottom line is very simple. Rise and fall in supply is not equal to increase or decrease in supply. Rise or fall can happen only due to change in the price of the product. Increase or decrease can happen due to change in all the other factors other than price. So this is understood. So can we understand the same narration or the narrative that you are explaining to us with the help of any schedule or a diagram or anything like that? Of course, yes. Let us understand the concept of variation in supply. I am using the word variation. The word variation is restricted only to rise or fall. I can use the word rise or fall only when I use the word variation. It's called variation in supply. That means it is either I am talking about rise in supply or fall in supply. But when I use the word changes in supply, you know what does it mean? Changes in supply means either increase in supply or decrease in supply. So basically, variation in supply means rise or fall in supply. Changes in supply means increase or decrease in supply. Variation can happen due to change in price only, whereas changes in supply, which means increase or decrease in supply, can happen due to any factor other than price, namely the following listed factors. So any other alternative word for rise or fall? Rise in supply can also be substituted by the word expansion. Expansion in supply. And this is called rise. And fall in supply can also be called as contraction in supply. Oh, that means 1 minute. Variation in supply means either it can be rise in supply or it can be fall in supply. Absolutely. Rise can also be called as expansion in supply, and this is called as contraction in supply. So absolutely understood now. So that means though rise, fall, increase, decrease, rise and increase, fall and decrease, they sound synonymous, but they are not. Rise or fall is attributed to variation in supply. So variation in supply can be divided into either rise in supply or fall in supply. Rise in supply is also called as expansion supply. Fall in supply is called as contraction in supply. When will this happen? Rise in supply. When price rise, supply will also rise. When this will happen? If price falls for a producer, supply will also fall. Fantastic. Absolutely understood. And it is making so much sense also. But when I see or read changes in supply is attributed to increase or decrease in supply. So why increase or decrease will happen? Increase or decrease in supply will happen for any factor other than price. Any factor but not price. So what could be those other factors? These are the listed down other factors. So when will supply increase? Assume that if you are using a better technology, supply will increase. That means you are using a modern technology, supply will increase. If you are using an upgraded technology, supply will increase. If I am using outdated technology, supply will decrease. If cost of production increases, my supply will decrease. I can't afford that. I cannot afford to produce at a rising cost. So is there any difference between variation in supply and changes in supply? Of course. Variation in supply refers to rise or fall in supply. Changes in supply means increase or decrease in supply. Variation happens, that means rise or fall happens due to change in price of the product. Increase or decrease in supply happens due to change in any factor other than price. It could be due to the change in technology, it could be due to the change in factors of production, cost of production, due to the change in taxation policy, commercial policy, government policy, climatic change, weather conditions, etc. etc. So the point is very clear. Also, rise in supply is alternatively called, the synonymous word for the rise in supply is expansion in supply, whereas the synonymous for fall in supply would be contraction in supply. increase and decrease in supply, whereas is called as increase and decrease in supply only. Someone asked me, so can this be made more simpler with the help of diagrams? I said, of course, yes. Why not? We can understand the same concept with the help of diagram as well. Have an understanding as how we can do this with the help of diagrams. Alright, for that one must know the nature of supply curve. We already discussed excuse me, sorry. We already discussed that while doing law of supply, and we all concluded that supply will always have a positive slope. That means the nature of supply curve is going to be something like this, where you have quantity supplied on x-axis and price on y-axis. By default, as per the law, this is my supply curve. Let us understand now the difference between rise in supply and fall in supply. Alright, rise in supply is also called as expansion in supply. Fall in supply is also called as contraction in supply. Why it will happen? So, rise in supply will happen due to rise in price. As a producer, as I told you, supply is producer oriented concept. So it is always producer oriented. As a producer, as a supplier, I would tend to supply more in case if the price goes up, and I'll tend to supply less in case the price falls down. This is rise in supply, which is also called as expansion in supply. How it's going to happen? Have a look over here. Suppose this is my supply curve, and I was in equilibrium. OP is the price, OQ is the quantity supplied. So this is quantity supplied and this is the price of the product. Now what if the price rises? Price is OP, price rises to OP1. See, there is a rise in the price from OP to OP1. If price will rise, let us see what will happen. Oh, it will intersect the supply curve. Earlier it intersected the supply curve at E. Now it will intersect at E1. So what will be the new supply? Oh, the new supply will be Q1. Very nice. When the price is OP, supply is OQ because it was in equilibrium over here. But if the price rises from OP to OP1, that means this is a rise in the price. As a result of which, my supply will also rise from OQ to OQ1. So what was the original price? So original price was OP. What is the new price? So new price is OP1. Very good. What is the original quantity offered for sale? OQ. What is the new quantity that we will offer for sale? So new quantity would be OQ1. Now you can make up your mind and say, yes sir, I agree with you. That means sir, I would conclude that this is rise in supply leads to movement of supply along the same curve. That means the changes happen, variation has happened on the same curve. Earlier also my curve was SS1. Now also my curve remains SS1. So I have simply shifted small movement along the same curve. I am shifting here, but I am yet on the same curve, absolutely same curve. What will happen in case of fall in supply? Of course, if the price will fall, as a producer, I am not interested in supplying more because if the price falls, my margin will also fall. Assume earlier I was in equilibrium and OP was the price and OQ was the quantity supply. Now if price falls from OP to OP1, that means this is the fall in the price. What will I do? Let us see where it intersects. Oh, so it intersects at E1 and my supply, which was earlier OQ, will now come down to OQ1. So what happened? Very simple. When the price was OP, I was supplying OQ. But as the price fell down from OP to OP1, my supply also fell down from OQ to just OQ1. This is called fall in supply. Very good. And this is rise in supply. Why it happened? It happened due to rise or increase in price of a product. Why it happened? Sir, this happened due to fall in price of product. Sir, point number 1, point number 1, point number 2, point number 2, point number 3, there is no point number 3 here, straight away went to point number 4. So my point number 3, rise in supply leads to movement of supply along the same curve. Fall in supply also leads to movement along the same curve, but it will not go upward to downward. It will go down. So here the movement will be up, there the movement will be down. 4 point of comparison just between rise in supply and fall in supply. Imagine 4 point of distinction, which involves diagram also. So if you combine both this diagram, you get the answer for variation in supply. So what do you mean by variation in supply? Variation in supply can be called as rise in supply or fall in supply. Can also be called as extension in supply or contraction in supply. So why does this happen? It happens only and only due to change in price of the product. Change in price of the product. That means extension will happen if there is a rise in the price. Contraction will happen if there is a fall in the price. So it happens on the same curve, or you have to shift the curve, it will happen on the same curve. In case of rise in supply, the point will move upward. Earlier it was E, now it is even. In case of fall, it will move downward. Earlier it was E, now it is even. I'm sure this much knowledge is far more than enough to understand this concept, which is equally very, very important. How I did with you rise in supply and fall in supply, same way we are going to do increase in supply and decrease in supply. Alright, have a look. Now let us understand the difference between increase in supply and decrease in supply. This is also referred to as changes in supply. Changes in supply means either increase in supply or decrease in supply. Increase in supply or decrease in supply can happen. For what reason? Sir, it can happen for any reason other than price. That means it can happen for factors of production, change in the cost of factor of production, taxation, subsidies, etc., etc. Several times we have discussed all those things. So basically, what do we write over here? So let me make you understand with the help of the diagram. Assume this is my supply curve, okay? And we were in equilibrium. Equilibrium means a position of rest. So OP is the price, OQ is the quantity supplied, and E is a point of equilibrium. So when the price was OP, the quantity supplied was OQ. Perfect. Suddenly, what happened? Price went up. Can I change the price? So you only said that increase or decrease in supply will happen only and only due to change in other factors other than price. So even if price goes up, this is not going to get impacted at all. I cannot show change in price over here. Showing change in price over here means you are talking about variation in supply. You are not talking about changes in supply. Changes in supply can happen only and only because of the other factors. So you don't have to change the price. My price is going to remain the same. You can't change price. Remember, my dear friends, that's the difference. That's the difference. So here my price will not change. So then what will happen? Very simple. I ask you a simple question. In case if you are using a better technology, in case if you use upgraded technology, modern technology, cutting edge technology, what will happen? Say if I am using the most outstanding, most updated, modern technology, then in that case my supply will increase, correct? If you want to increase your supply, so without changing the price, so price is going to remain the same. And you want to increase the supply also. You want to increase, the price is remaining same. Supply is OQ. I want to change it to OQ1. So see, where does they intersect? So they intersect at E1. That means my supply curve now will look like this. Earlier supply curve was SS. Now my supply curve would be S1, S1. So that means there is a shift in the supply curve. Shift in supply curve to its right. You can check it, it's a right side. The supply curve has changed from SS to S1, 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 S1. This is called increase in supply. Why it happened? It happened due to factor other than price. Price has not changed. Price will remain the same. Why it happened? Sir, it happened because of using better technology. What was the supply before? OQ. What is the supply now? OQ1. Is there any increase? Yes, sir. How much? This much. So what happened to the supply curve? So supply curve shifted to my right. You can see over here, keeping the price same. As we know, what is price? So price is determined by demand and supply. DD is demand, SS is supply. So automatically we'll come to know what is the price. Price means it is an equilibrium price. So here E was the price. Since I don't want to change the price, price remains same. And my supply has to increase, so I am shifting. So here it will be a point where it gets intersected and my supply curve inevitably, mandatorily, compulsorily, by following the system, has to be drawn at E1. So if I draw curve at E1, it's going to be like this. And that's why there's a shift in the curve from SS to S1, S1. In short, increase in supply happened because of the factors other than price. Can be any factor. What will lead to? The supply will increase. Earlier it was OQ, now it is OQ1. Why it has increased? It has increased because of the better technology. When there is an increase in supply, my supply curve will shift. Earlier if you see, in rise in supply, when we did rise in supply, there was no shift. In case of rise in supply, rise in supply, what we did? In case of rise in supply, comparison. This was my supply curve. This was my equilibrium. So OQ is, OP is the price, OQ is the quantity supplied, and E was my equilibrium. What happened is, rise in supply happens only when price increase. So I have to inevitably increase the price. So price changes from OP to OP1. As a result, what happens to supply? So supply also rises from OQ to OQ1. This is called rise. It happened on the same curve, same. Whereas over here, I have shifted my supply curve. because price remains the same. Quantity has to increase. It intersect over here. So there is a shift in the supply curve. In case if I want to do fall in supply. So I cannot use the word fall. I use the word decrease. Very good. Decrease in supply. How it will happen? So have a look over here. By default, this is my supply curve. What about the equilibrium? Sir, my equilibrium would be intersection of price and supply. OQ is a quantity offered, OP is the price. So the question is, for the decrease in supply, can I change the price? No. So price will remain the same. If price is going to remain the same, can you please tell me what do you mean by decrease in supply? So supposing if I am using outdated technology or my production is, let us say, labor oriented techniques. So because of the labor oriented technology or labor oriented techniques in the modern days, I will not be able to scale up my production in anticipation of demand. So what I am going to do? So I will lose an edge over my competitors. My supply will tend to decrease. So that means price remaining same. You want to decrease the supply. Earlier is OQ. So now supposing, let us say your supply is OQ1. So your supply curve basically can be formed by simply taking this over here. Earlier E was equilibrium. Now E1 will become your equilibrium. So that means price remaining same, OP. Your supply is OQ1. So how will you show that on the curve? So my curve will now become this one. So you have shifted from SS to S2, S2. Hey, what's happened? Here there is a shift. Yes, there is a shift in supply curve. Where it has shifted? So shifted to left. Perfect. It is shifting to the left. That means decrease in supply will always be shift in supply curve to its left. So why it resulted? It resulted due to factors which were adversely affecting my supply, and that is the reason it shifted to its left. Will the price change? Price will not change. Price will remain the same. Increase or decrease happens due to factors other than price. So we have not changed the price. Price remaining same, supply is changing, so it can be increase in supply or decrease in supply. Increase in supply, supply curve will shift. Decrease in supply, supply curve will shift. Increase in supply, supply curve will shift to its right. Decrease in supply, supply curve will shift to its left. Whereas in variation, if you remember what we did previously, variation in supply means rise or fall in supply. Rise or fall in supply means extension or contraction in supply. In that, it happens due to price. This is not happening due to price. That happens due to price. So there is no shift in the supply curve. It will be along the supply curve, either up or down. Here, there is a shift in the supply curve, either to right or to left. So by now, you will know the distinction between variation in supply and changes in supply. You know the distinction between increase in supply and decrease in supply. Prior to that, we did the distinction between rise in supply and fall in supply. So to sum up, any permutation combination with respect to extension, contraction, increase, decrease, reasons, factors, diagrams, schedule, etc. we've all discussed in detail, and I'm very sure the bottom line that you need to remember is, so there are two concepts, either variation in supply or changes in supply. Variation results into rise or fall, changes results into increase or decrease. Variation means rise or fall. Synonymous word for rise or fall would be extension and contraction. Whereas increase and decrease remains the same words, increase and decrease only. In case of rise or fall, it happens due to what? Sir, it happens due to price, change in price. It happens to, why, for what reason increase or decrease happens? So it happens due to all factors other than price. What happens with respect to the supply curve? So in case of variation, supply curve will move along the same curve. That means both if you see rise or fall, they'll be shown along the same curve, either upward or downward. Whereas in case of changes in supply, there will be a shift in the supply curve. Either the supply curve will shift to its right or else it will shift to its left. Shifting to right indicates increase in supply, shifting to left indicates decrease in supply. With this, your extension, contraction, rise, fall, increase, decrease in supply comes to an end.